welcome to another edition of Two Steps Ahead Podcast. Two Steps Ahead Podcast highlighting the stuff we've stepped in so you don't have to. And we'd like to, first of all, say that I'm Son Edom alongside somebody who is wearing her ruby red slippers.
Yes, I am.
Are you off to the
Wizard of Oz?
Yes. Are you going to follow the Yellow Brick Road?
Yes.
Off to find the guy behind the curtain?
Wouldn't it be nice to find the guy behind the curtain right now and stop all this madness in the world?
Great and powerful Oz. So as you can see, we are continuing our tour of Southern California as we are in the shadows.
Yes.
The limelight of the Hollywood sign.
Can you see it in the background? Those of you watching us on TV or on YouTube.
I can hold it with my hand. If you just position it just right, you can hold it in your hand. Yeah. And so, yes, we're here at the world-famous Hollywood sign, which started in 1923. Did you know that? It first erected in 1923 as part of it was like a big billboard, I guess you can say, and it was promoting Hollywood Land.
Yes. Which
was down below us, which is behind the camera, was a housing development. And plots of land at the time went from anywhere from $150 to $400 per plot.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the Hollywood sign itself was an advertisement for that tract of land, Hollywood Land. And so it was a private sign for, I think, from 1923, when it first was erected, to about 1944 or something like that. And then there was a change. And then I think in 1973, it became a historical landmark. So in 1949, it became the city. And then 73 became a historical landmark. Do you know how tall each letter is?
I do not. I would say probably, 6 feet? 12 feet?
45 feet.
No.
That's what
seriously?
It said, 45 feet. I looked it up.
That's 45 feet?
From the bottom to the top. Each letter, they said, was 45 feet tall.
Oh, my gosh.
Do you know how long it is?
No. Well, 45 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yes, you're on to something.
So 4,500?
It says 450 feet. 10 feet per letter.
Oh, see, so do not ask me to do math,
45
people.
45 high, 10 wide, or maybe a little less than 10 wide and some space. But yeah, and then there was, in true Hollywood fashion, there was one suicide back in 1932. An actress, 24-year-old, jumped off one of the letters. Ugh. Which letter? Let's play that Hollywood morbid game. Which
and
letter?
If you take the tour for the Hollywood stars, you get all this morbidity when they're like, oh, so-and-so died in that hotel. And let's see, 1932.
Yeah, 1932. Which letter did Peg Entwistle, a 24-year-old actress, Peter Pan off of?
I'm going to guess one of the L's.
No.
No?
The H.
Second guess. Okay.
The H in September of 1932.
Sad.
And so the cost of building the sign back in 1923, $21,000.
Oh, wow.
I don't know what that would be in today's standards.
Lots.
It used to have light bulbs. It used to illuminate.
It did, and there was lots of car accidents.
Do you know how many lights?
No.
3,700.
Wow.
And up until 1944, one guy, because it was a private entity, one guy who was a caretaker, I guess, for the plot of land that's above the sign, which is Mount Lee, one guy took care of all of that. And then when it got passed on in 1949, the city of L.A. and such took over, and then that's when it became a city problem. And then, of course, throughout the years, it was restored many times. I think 1978 was one big time where celebrities got involved, like Alice Cooper, Warner Brothers, I think a couple others, to restore each letter. And then it's been restored throughout the years, and now it's eco-friendly with paints from Dutch Boy paint or something like that. So now it's all...
And no lights, so that we're not taking pictures when we're driving down the freeway at night.
Yes.
And causing accidents.
But on a clear night, it is somewhat luminescent paint that you can kind of see from down in the valley of Hollywood Land that started back in 1923. So, with that being said, as we sit in the shadows of Hollywood,
yes,
the Hollywood sign, what Now, you've mentioned before that you like watching those black and whites on one of
Love
those
them.
Alphabet Soup channels.
Nah, TCM, Turner Classic Movies.
TCM. So that was the golden age.
It was.
The golden age of Hollywood.
It was.
So again, what were some of the, I guess, some of your favorite movies that you have on hand? Like,
Oh, gosh.
do you have any favorite movies or favorite actors, actresses?
Some of my favorite movies from that era. So I love the movies from the 40s, 50s, and 60s because the wardrobe from those movies is just a whole lot of eye candy. So pretty much anything in that era. 1939 was a really big year for glamour Hollywood. That was when The Wizard of Oz came out, hence the ruby red slippers that I'm wearing
She's
today.
Off to see the wizard.
Yes.
Little does she know, she's sitting right next to the wizard.
I was just going to say that. I'm sitting next to the wizard. I didn't realize today was one of those days I had to pay my dues.
Yes, you got to pay your dues.
So this is the great Son Edom, a.k.a. the wizard.
Yes.
So the Wizard of Oz was in 1939, as was Gone with the Wind, which is where I sort of kind of got my name from the Gone with the Wind. So 1939 was a big year. Some of my favorite movies.
Were you born in 1939?
I was. No. I'm not that old. No. But Gone with the Wind was the first movie I think that I ever saw. It was playing on TV. They were playing a repeat of it, and I think that was one of the first movies that I've ever seen. Was Gone with the Wind, and the cartoon Robin Hood was the first movie that I saw in the theater. But I really like the actors like Bette Davis, Cary Grant, James Mason. One of my favorite movies is All About Eve, which is typical Hollywood because the whole plot line of the story is that Bette Davis is this aging actress, and Anne Baxter comes along, and she's a young starlet, and she does all these evil, conniving, manipulating things to weave herself into Bette Davis's life and then overtake her role on the stage, and she weaves her way into her circle in the Broadway, her theater friends and everything. So it's like a typical Hollywood starlet climbing to the top the wrong way.
So she was the original Vivian from Pretty Woman. She was working it. Work it, Anne Baxter.
She was, and I love those movies. I love the drink carts that just come out of every movie. The fancy decanter glasses. I love the wardrobe. So
that's the one thing I could never really fathom is warm beverages. Mm-hmm. They have the...
No, they had the ice buckets.
Oh, they had the ice buckets.
They had that. So they bring out this fancy drink cart, and back in if you look at the movies from, I would say, all the way up into the 60s, anytime you see a bedroom or you see a bar, they don't have the products sitting on the counter like we do today. Everything is in glass decanters. So your perfume, your lotion, your powder, and then all of your drinks. So I'm assuming that if they went out to buy whiskey, I don't know what a whiskey label would look like or tequila at that time, but anytime you see, and now part of it is product placement, obviously they didn't want to advertise, but they just had all these glass decanters everywhere and they just poured their...
So one would have to be careful that you didn't spray yourself with whiskey and drink the perfume.
Exactly.
You have to know which
exactly.
glass.
Exactly.
Is
yeah,
the
but
right glass.
I've always been so fascinated about that. But All About Eve is probably one of my favorite old movies. Yeah.
What about let's you mentioned up to the 1960s. What about more modern? Because if you watch movies, it's interesting because if you watch movies through the decades, and for example, when I got my English master's, one of the classes I took was a horror film genre. Mm-hmm. And you watched one film per decade. So like the 1920s was Nosferatu, the 1930s was Frankenstein. I think we jumped to the 50s, it was The Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and then you get to the 70s is Halloween. I think there was Rosemary's Baby in there. And then in the 90s you got to Scream. So you see kind of the evolution of the horror film genre anyways from way back to now. Mm-hmm. And so you see a change in how it's produced, how they're shot. Mm-hmm. Obviously technology matters, obviously what they can do, capabilities with computers and things like that. And of course then as society gets more and more evolved, I guess you can say, the plot lines get thicker and thicker and then more complex and more psychotic maybe at sometimes. So have you seen that in some of those kind of glamour type movies from the golden age, some of those? Because we don't really have, like you say, Bette Davis and some of those. We don't really have those kind of iconic actors and actresses that are kind of glamorous and kind of like, prestige like they used to be. Now they're just celebrities doing any type of film. You know, you can do one, could do a comedy. You think of Harrison Ford. He could do a comedy. He could do an action adventure. He could do a drama. Back then, they seemed to be more like dance, more like dramatic, the more theater style. And it was, like you said, you don't see glasses of whiskey or whatever in, you know, Harrison Ford. They slop up to the bar, you know, and stuff like that. So, so like, have you seen those type of films that you like from back then in the golden age? Anything that kind of replicates that now today?
So yeah, there's definitely an evolution. So, you know, obviously the decor inside the buildings is evolution. You know, the wardrobe is evolution. The way they entertain guests was an evolution, you know, through, the 40s, 50s, and 60s when you look at the movies. So it's fascinating to see, especially the hemline, like the hemlines go up and down, the hair, you know, styles, you know, obviously get longer the older that you go, less formal. So like some of the storylines, sometimes you look back at some of the storylines and it's like, oh my gosh, I have to like push the guide and see what year that was. I'm like, they did not just do that back in. I'm like, what year was that? So sometimes there's literally men that like slapping the women's faces, or there was one movie where the guy thought that the woman was like smarting off, and so he literally took his thumb and he put his thumb on her lipstick, on her lips like that, and he smeared her lipstick all over her chin. And I was my mouth just completely dropped. You see a lot of stereotyping, you know, in roles, and they kind of evolve over the years. And what's really funny, because I really love like eye candy, and I really love the aesthetics of the films. What's really funny is when you watch movies in the 60s, they have these gadgets. So like, especially if someone is trying to be romantic, you know, the guy, so they have like switches on the wall that turns on the music and the lights, and then there'll be another switch that pulls down the curtains, and there's another switch where like the bed's like comes out of the wall. There's like all these like, and it looks like a radio, like, you know, like a programmer radio thing. And it has like the one I was watching yesterday, and literally had buttons like that said music, fireplace, door opening. I don't know what it was about the 60s. And I'm like, why don't we still have those in our houses like now?
That's like James Bond romance stuff right there.
It was. And you see that it's really prevalent in the later 60s, you know, in the movies. It cracks. I'm like, I laugh every single time.
So that's funny you say that, because if you follow the James Bond movies, and at some point I kind of gave up because after a while it just got out of control. Because you just, you know, you have too many of them, it just gets wild, right?
No. The next James Bond is like on hold because of COVID. I'm dying for it to come out.
I think whatever one before Skyfall was the last one. But see, I love the early ones. And Sean Connery, you know, recently passed away. Roger Moore. Those are the ones that I like the best because it's that type of thing. Those gadgets, those type of things those are the gadgets that they have. They didn't have the technology. So his car wasn't these like nuclear missiles that shoot out of the tailpipe.
Right.
They were like the legitimate open it and here's the buttons that press and then this happens. The oil slick, or you know, the bulletproof shield, or you know, the ejectile seat for the passenger side. So it's kind of
that's attainable.
Something along those lines, but in the action film.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like watching the evolution of James Bond and those films, because it does exactly that. It takes those things that you're talking about in his weaponry and in his, you know, gadgets and cars and stuff, and it evolves through the time. And then, of course, at some point now, like I said, you can have anything go because of technology can make, you know, anything come out of a car or whatever. But yeah, I totally get that. Okay, if you had to pick one or two. Okay, so you mentioned some old like Bette Davis and stuff. If you had to pick, like, because there's many talented actors, actresses, if you had to pick one or two that a movie's going to come out, and there's a really good chance that without even knowing anything about it, just because this person's name is on it, you'll go see it.
In modern day?
In modern day.
Oh, wow.
Because I would pick, while I think about it.
Probably like Tom Hanks.
Okay.
Is a pretty stable. Anything that Tom Hanks does is amazing. Kevin Costner.
Yes.
Russell Crowe.
So I have two that I was going to emphasize: Kevin Costner and Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, and Clint Eastwood, his movies. Yeah, whether he's directing or acting or both.
Well, that's the thing, because there's two movies that he's done that I haven't seen, but he wasn't in them, that are supposedly phenomenal. One is Flags of Our Fathers, which is about the Iwo Jima
yes.
picture. Actually, the planting the flag picture.
Yes,
it tells that
I missed
story.
that one as well.
And then the other one, which is a Japanese language, so it's subtitles, and I don't feel like reading it right yet, but it's Letters from Iwo Jima. Mm-hmm. And so it's the same concept, but it's from the Japanese side, and it's Japanese language. You have to read the subtitles, so I haven't gotten to it yet.
I love Clint Eastwood's movies. Gran Torino was excellent. All his Westerns were excellent, although they were very, a lot of his Westerns were very, what's the word, against women, not very nice.
Well, I think weren't they a lot of them done south of the border? Like
he did some spaghetti westerns, yeah,
and some of those, but no. And I want to get to that too, the evolution of what you're talking about with the smudging of the lipstick and with that whole the way the actors and actresses and people were portrayed. Because even James Bond, there's a lot of things that people now look back on and will look at and be like, wait a minute, that's misogynist, that's sexist, that's whatever. And to use as a jumping off point for that is Molly Ringwald has revisited some of her movies from the 1980s with John Hughes. And I don't know if you heard about this, but I guess her daughter is of age to watch The Breakfast Club.
Okay.
And so she was watching The Breakfast Club. And at the time, when she did the movie, she was 15, I think. So obviously, she's 15. But now when she looks back on it, she sees just how much of an impact that movie has or could have on girls, especially because Bender was, he was just harassing her the whole time.
Right.
Sexual harassment the whole time.
Right.
And then there's a scene in there that they included in there that obviously had no business with any part of the movie except to show that Bender was, a pervert, basically.
Right.
And then there was another storyline that went to that where apparently they wanted to include a scene in the movie where it included a gym teacher swimming naked in a pool. And so I guess Molly Ringwald and Ali Sheedy approached John Hughes and convinced him not to put it in because A, it had no point, and B, it was just gratuitous. And so John Hughes was like, okay, I see that, so I'll take it out. So at least it was kind of the early parts of, okay, we're starting to understand. Because in the 80s, you could watch any film, and there's gratuitous anything in there. I remember when Lethal Weapon came out, the first one, and one of the opening scenes is a girl topless, she's high, and then she jumps off a balcony and commits suicide. And the whole buzz about that movie from classmates and stuff was the fact you had someone topless on screen that you could go watch, right? And it was mainstream. It wasn't you have to go sneak in anybody's magazines or anything. It was right there for everybody to watch. And so you start to see this kind of evolution on screen, somewhat, or an awareness.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because there used to be a committee. I don't remember the name of the committee, but it was in force early days up until about the mid 50s-ish, I think, right before or right during the whole communism thing that went through Hollywood. So there was this board, this group of men, and every film that was made in Hollywood had to go through this, not the board of directors, but for lack of a better term, had to go through this committee, right? And they decided what was okay and what wasn't. So some of the things that they decided was okay, obviously being, sexist or, degrading towards women. Obviously they thought that was okay, but it was not okay. For instance, there were movies that would portray a woman in a light other than, pure. So like if there was a woman and a man who were flirting and, going on the path, like they wanted to have sex, they made sure that the woman was, the script was written in a way that didn't put her in a bad light. And so didn't have like a sex scene or certain things were okay. Like Cary Grant was in a movie with, I want to say Audrey Hepburn, and there was a big age discrepancy between the two of them. And so Cary Grant said, the only way that I'm going to do this movie is if she comes on, if the female comes on to the man and not vice versa, because I'm way older than her. And if I'm pursuing her in the movie, it's going to be creepy. But so if she pursues me, I'll do it. And sure enough, all through the movie, she's like flirting with him and, making the moves on him. And he's like, no. And he's very respectful. And so there were certain things that they just wouldn't allow. And as soon as that committee was disbanded, then if you look at some of the movies, it's like, oh my gosh, like everything, like the 70s, the 60s and 70s, some of the things that they got away with was crazy. And now you see it's been kind of a free for all up until then. But there hasn't been like an actual committee, but there's been this like moral, like, oh, what's okay and what's not. And then you get up to the 80s and it's like, okay, now we're flashing, the nude part of the female body. That's okay. Now up to 2020, we've seen images of completely nude females, completely nude males. And so they don't have that committee anymore, but there's still this debate about, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. But yeah, we're just getting away with everything nowadays.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing that is kind of the trend was, okay, the public image or the public persona was going to be cleaned up. But behind the scenes, as we found out recent times, you still had the casting couch and you still had some of those underbelly things going on. So even though the public eye was, we're going to clean up Hollywood and we're going to respect women and we're going to do these things, behind the scenes, that culture was still there and people were still doing things and no one was calling out attention until, when the Me Too movement started to come out just a few years ago. And then the focus became on what goes on off camera and behind the scenes.
Right. And it's a problem. It's a huge problem in Hollywood because there has been a lot of times when women were asked to do things that they didn't want to do. Some participated, some didn't. But that has been an unfortunate underbelly in some of this stuff.
Well, you think about Back to the Future. In fact, I had done some show prep for this show, and then it included a note about Back to the Future, and then Back to the Future came on last night. But it was kind of funny. But there's a scene in there where Biff is in the car taking advantage of Marty's mom, and at the time, that's pretty graphic of an assault scene, even though it's not graphic in nature. The content, like the experience and the emotion and the facial expressions that Leah Thompson is portraying in that, was pretty traumatic and pretty pretty right there. And there was some back and forth as to whether or not that should have been in there and included in it because of the nature. It kind of seemed like Biff, it was okay for him to get away with that. But here's the other thing too, more subtle. Okay, more subtle. 2 movies. I don't know if you saw the movie She's All That, with Rachel Lee Cook, and she's the nerd, and she's a painter, and she's like a nobody. And then one of the guys, I forget his name, takes an interest, and then she changes, comes out of her cocoon, becomes a butterfly. Now she's this gorgeous princess type thing, and she becomes popular. Okay, so she goes from nerd to popular just by a transformation of how she looks. And then the other one was Clueless with Brittany Murphy. I don't know if you saw that. It's her character was the same way. She was goofy and nerdy, and then Alicia Silverstone's character and her friends kind of adopt her and bring her into the group.
Right.
And they kind of give her this makeover, this change, and then she's popular, and now she's taking the popularity away from Alicia Silverstone's character and so on and so forth. And so it's like, then there's this image that, especially back then, and maybe it still stands true today, although it's been forever and a day since I've seen an actual new movie, but this image that, okay, these kind of nerdy intellects aren't anything. They're like societal rejects, but it's the popular, good-looking ones, and that's what you have to live up to.
Well, it's the same premise as Grease, and there's been so much flack over the years over Grease because on one hand, it's this fun, like the music is great, it makes you want to dance, it's like back in the 50s, it's just so much fun, but the plot line is awful in a lot of ways because she then has to become something else to be acceptable.
But then also, too, because I was going to note that movie too, but also he kind of changes because he becomes a jock and he actually letters in long distance running, and so he actually becomes a letter. And then they realize at the end, I think, at least my interpretation was, even though she was still dressed up as the hot chick, so to speak, that they could just be themselves because he shredded his.
They kind of met in the middle.
Yeah,
so
that's what I'm saying. They met in the middle because
she got rid of her dowdy, good girl clothes and became more, out there. And then he was not so hiding behind his leather jacket and kind of came out a little bit. And they kind of met in the middle. But yeah, it's like she wasn't cool, and everyone was making fun of her until she had this makeover.
Well, she was from Australia.
Yeah. Is that a bad thing?
Got that going for her. I'm just kidding.
So it's just sad that it has to, that you have to change in order to be acceptable. But that plot line, there's many movies.
Now, obviously, like you said, we've gotten to some things where anything can go. I mean, you think of movies such as Reality Bites and Party of Five and some of these shows and stuff, that portray other things. 90210 had a lot of things. So there's, of course, we can talk about a million things over the next million years about it. But there tended to be, and there still tends to be, kind of a trend in Hollywood that, whether it's a lack of respect for somebody and their character, whether it's how we're going to treat people, how we're going to have this image of people, all these different things, it's still kind of out there. And really anything can go. And even though you try to kind of make the public eye, you don't want to tarnish the public eye of Hollywood. There's still the underbelly that goes on, because you still have, is it Corey Haim or Corey Feldman? One of the Coreys, he's still out there, talking about the abuse that he suffered at the hands of somebody, supposedly mysterious, and he says it's still going on. And then, you still see a lot of these young actors, actresses that, struggle with drug addiction, drug abuse and stuff like that. And it's with anybody, but I think it's more focused and emphasized in Hollywood because there is that demand of, okay, I want to be successful. I want to chase my dream. I want to be this celebrity superstar, but do I really have to go through all this to get there? And am I willing to sacrifice my character, my morals, who I am, to achieve that? And on the flip side, then who are the people that are putting these actors and actresses through this? Why do they have to go through that? I read a book one time. I forget the name of it, but it was the lurid details of sexualized Hollywood, and it had all these different actors and actresses and their experiences, and a lot of it was the women going to the men because the men were the dominant producers and directors and so forth, and these were now actors like Sylvester Stallone allegedly, and the guy that did Under Siege. Those movies, and a bunch of Marked for Death. I forget his name offhand. I can picture him. But, so you have these people that were these producers that were trying to do movies, and, the inappropriate actions and behaviors that they may have allegedly treated these wannabe starlets, and how they would go through. And then it ultimately came out through the Me Too movement. I mean, Harvey Weinstein and so forth. And it's like, is that something that is going to continue? And if it does, should people just walk away, or do you sacrifice who you are because you still want to achieve that stardom?
I don't think that you need to. If you have, I kind of see it as the people that have real talent. They don't need to. They don't need to sacrifice who they are. So, like Ron Howard is a phenomenal guy. I don't see that he has sacrificed anything. He's really talented, very generous. There's a lot of really nice people. Jodie Foster, I have a lot of respect for her, even though I've never met her. But she seems, to have stayed above the fray, and she's very professional. I love her work. So I think that there's a lot of people that you don't have to sacrifice, and that stand by their guns and you go on your talent, but it's a tough business. I've been in it a little bit. I've met a lot of stars and been on a lot of sets, and it's tough. It's not for the faint of heart. It's very competitive. It's very dog eat dog in a lot of ways. You get on some nice production crews, some sets that are really respectful, and then other ones that are not so much, and they don't really care about anybody. So it's both. I think that if you want to play that game, you'll get somewhere. If you want to sacrifice your morals, you will get somewhere, but not very far for very long. It'll catch up with you. But I think that there's no reason why you cannot rest in your talent, but that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get anywhere either. It's a hard business. It's a really hard business to be in, from the crew, the makeup, the producers, the directors, the writers, the actors. It's really tough. Now,
you've been an extra. You've been on set 99 different TV movies.
Yes.
Mostly television, but a couple of movies as well. So you've kind of seen it. And as we sit here in the shadows of the Hollywood sign, one of the things we wanted to do was have a discussion about Hollywood, movies, what we like, what we don't like, maybe how it affects us, because we do live at least here in Los Angeles, we do live in Hollywood.
Yes.
And so we thought it'd be fun to come out here and do a show in the shadows of the Hollywood sign, as you see behind us. And as we continue the conversation, okay, you've been on set, like you said, 99 different productions, individual. So you might have been on a show a few times.
Right. So many of the shows I was on multiple times as a regular barfly or regular staff teacher or, whatever, office worker maybe.
But biggest one, you were the double douchebag on Superstore.
That's his favorite. Yeah. Yes. I was the double douchebag.
But you've also been on like Criminal Minds.
Triple douche. Yes.
Oh, you were triple.
I was the triple douche.
Wow, you were triple. Even worse than I remember.
Yeah.
Wow. No wonder why.
Maybe it was double. I don't know.
So you've had the, you've had that. So you've had that where you've been picked on.
I made pretty much, I was not very, obedient on set that day. Normally when I'm on set, I'm very obedient. I do what I'm told. There's been a couple of times when I've gone outside of, that, and that was one of those days where I was not being very obedient. So they, got me back. So made me the double douche.
So outside of that experience, which is probably warranted because you weren't cooperating.
Yes.
Outside of that, how has your experience been dealing on these sets? Dealing with the cast and dealing with the production staff and producers, showrunners, things like that. How has your overall experience been for maybe people like me who are on the outside for the most part? I've had a few interactions with some people, but I've been more on the outside looking in. Mm-hmm. But you being on the inside, what's your experience been like?
It's first of all, it's a blast. It is an absolute blast. I love being on set. I can't wait to be back on set, when my life is, settled again and I can go back to doing that. But it was an absolute, I'm just going to be honest. I'm a nerd. I'm a geek in that way. I love learning. I love watching. The crew has like ladders and gadgets and there's just like this hustle and bustle, everywhere. You get to meet a lot of famous actors. You get to see firsthand what they're doing. So I absolutely love it. I have some starstruck stories. I have some funny set stories. I have some camera trickery stories. But let me tell you a few of the shows that I was on. Just in case, see if you recognize. I won't go through all 99, but I'll just like the popular ones.
She sent me the list, so if you would like it, I can send it to you. Maybe get an autograph for you.
No. I wrote it down because I have terrible recall memory. Like if you've been listening to us or watching us for very long at all, I am such a scatter. Like I don't know. Recall has left my brain. So
there might be onto something. If you want an autographed copy of all the shows she's been in, just hit her up on Instagram, and she might send you one digital copy.
Yeah. Their pictures are on my Instagram feed. There's one of those story bubbles on my page as seen on, or TV sightings, I think is what I called it. Yep. There's a whole bunch of pictures on there. So I was on the Mindy Project, Parenthood. Partners was fun because that was Kelsey Grammer. And, that was a lot. I got to meet, I did a scene actually with Kelsey Grammer. That was really fun. Franklin and Bash, Scandal, American Sniper, Legends, Anger Management with Charlie Sheen, Masters of Sex, The X's, Switched Up Birth. I was on a couple of times. Sons of Anarchy, Scorpion, Stalker, Criminal Minds, Parks and Rec with Amy Poehler. She was a lot of fun to watch. Revenge, NCIS, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Cougar Town. Did you ever see Cougar Town?
That's with
Courtney.
Yes, whatever she is now, Courtney Cox. Or
yeah. I was on. I was at Barfly on Cougar Town one time. House of Lies with Don Cheadle. That was a lot of fun. Blackish, Aquarius, Odd Couple, Grace and Frankie with Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin, Sam Waterston, and Martin Sheen. That was a lot of fun. I saw them all in the same room. What else would you know? Let's see. Bones, Mom.
A lot of not a lot of those, but a majority of them I've seen. Mm-hmm. And I remember
Two Broke Girls.
Okay.
Have you seen that one?
I remember most recently it was the Superstore. That's why I bring it up, because after we started doing this show together, that's when I saw it and I was like, hey, that's her. Yeah. She's actually not lying.
I'm actually not lying. Yeah,
She's not making it up.
And I have pictures of most of these, not all of them, but I have pictures of most of them. Let's see. NCIS, both that one in LA. Castle. Drunk History was a funny one. Children's Hospital with Henry Winkler. That was an interesting one. And The Muppets. Just trying to see. Big Bang Theory. The Grinder. Rizzoli and Isles, The Middle, that was fun. What's her name? Oh,
which one?
She was really nice. The lady, the mom on The Middle.
Oh,
that was a fun show. Grey's Anatomy, Curb Your Enthusiasm, American Horror Story, Santa Clarita Diet. Drew Barrymore was really nice. That's Code Black. That's probably the one. Here and Now, Lethal Weapon, Superstore.
So I just got through watching.
I think that's Speechless with Minnie Driver. So that's probably the ones that you would know.
I just got done watching the Rizzoli Isles series.
I was a doctor.
Oh, were you? Yeah.
Yes.
So I have to go back and see which one you were. But it's kind of funny because you mentioned Starstruck. Okay, and so I want to touch on celebrity worship or like the starstruckness. Okay, and because I looked it up because I know you like definitions, and you like academia, and you like to learn.
I do.
So I looked up a psychological definition, not Webster's, but more of a psychological definition of what a celebrity worship type thing might be. And basically, a conclusion of a couple different sites was that it fills something in a person's life that they might be lacking. That's why you look to them. You live vicariously through them. And so that kind of seemed, without getting into the whole mind, that kind of seemed an underlining theme. We like to look at the celebrities, worship the celebrities, be in awe, starstruck, whatever, because it's something that, we don't have. So first off, who were you starstruck?
So I've seen a lot, every single one of those shows that I mentioned had some sort of celebrity or actor, well-known, person. It's like, oh, so-and-so's here today or whatever. And there's like a code that we're supposed to follow. You're not supposed to talk to them. You're not supposed to gush all over them. Absolutely no pictures, no autographs, no conversation. Leave them alone. Ignore them. But sometimes you can't help. Like there's certain people on set that like, it's like so-and-so's here. It's like, oh my gosh. So it's kind of cool. So, I was doing one, let me just go through these really super fast and then I'll tell you a couple stories. So Steve Carell, Kelsey Grammer, Kerry Washington, Henry Winkler, Tim Robbins, Holly Hunter, Amy Poehler, Don Cheadle, Charlie Sheen, Wayne Knight, Newman from, Seinfeld, Leah Remini, Kirsten Johnson, David Allen Bosch, Mark Paul Gosselaar from Saved by the Bell, Jane Seymour, Heather Locklear, Malcolm McDowell, Lily Tomlin, Jane Fonda, Sam Waterston, Martin Sheen, Clint Eastwood. So those are the ones that were like the big ones that kind of like stuck out. So I was on the set of Angie Tribeca. We were there for like 4 or 5 days in a row, and Steve Carell and his wife were the writer producers for the show, but we never saw them. But one day we were in the church and we were filming like this wedding scene, and I happened to turn around and Steve Carell was standing in the back, and he just, for whatever reason, we locked eyes or we caught, each other's gaze, and the look on my face must have terrified him.
You scared him off.
I did, because he made a beeline. He's like, oh, and he went around step back around, and because I looked at him like, oh, in my head, I was like, oh my God, that's Steve Carell. My face must have showed that. It must have betrayed me, and he immediately hid behind so I didn't cause a scene. That was pretty funny. Kerry Washington is absolutely charming. I love her. But Tim Robbins, okay, Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, yes.
So I was on 2 of his shows. I was on The Brink, and I was on Here and Now. And so I got to work with him twice. He's very tall. He's like 6 feet, 6 or something. He's very intimidating. So we're on The Brink, and when you go onto these sets, they're on a soundstage, right? So the soundstage is like this big warehouse type building, and then when you go inside the soundstage, then they have the set. So like the living room, the police station, whatever it is, built, inside the soundstage. So between the set of the presidential war room type thing that they were filming, between that set and the door to the actual outside was very small. There was like a little small. It's normally not that small, but for some reason it was really small. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to go get a drink. And as soon as I did that, I start walking towards Tim Robbins comes in, and we literally run into each other. And I was like, and I looked up at him, and I was just like, oh, and I didn't know what to say. We were just like, he's like looking at me like, what are you doing? And I'm looking at him like, oh my God, there's Tim Robbins. And we were just like frozen. And then I like slowly backed out of his way and just kind of like leaned up against the wall. And he's just looking at me like, who is this girl? And then, of course, everyone was laughing, and it was very intimidating. It was just like.
Was he still breathing out of his eyelids from the movie Bull Durham? If you ever watched it? He had all these nutty things to help him pitch better.
And he didn't say a word. He didn't say, "Oh, pardon me." He didn't say. And then when I saw him again on the set of Here and Now, I was literally standing right next to him in the kitchen for a couple of days, filming this scene because he was the character that was retiring. He was giving a speech, and I was standing like right there. And he doesn't talk. Some of that, like Henry Winkler, he'll stand there in between scenes and he'll just carry on a conversation with you. He's so funny. Tim Robbins, he just stands there. So it's very intimidating, and he's so tall, and you're like, oh God, and like, okay, don't look at him. Don't. But then I'm like, I want to look because it's...
Well, you can't help it, right?
You can't help it.
Now, you had, growing up, you had like Teen Beat or some of those magazines?
Yeah, Tiger Beat.
Tiger Beat. Okay. And so that was one of the things that was kind of interesting. When you look at the evolution of celebrity worship or whatever, I think it could go back to the crazed phenomena of idol worship, or celebrity worship in this case, probably went back to Elvis. That's probably the first time we had somebody that hit the scene and everybody just went nuts, right? Probably in the 50s maybe. That's kind of when the decorum kind of went out the window and we were like, oh, nutty. And then the Beatles, obviously, and Beatlemania and stuff. And then you had the fan magazines. So like the very first fan magazine was Photo Play. It came out in 1911, actually, and lasted until 1980. And so that's where you can start to get the pictures and things that people would, I guess, tape on your wall or whatever, and peel them out. And then, of course, you went from the fan magazines, which was like Tiger Beat and some of those, celebrity-style ones. And then you got into more of the tabloid-style ones. And so became the difference between, okay, this is just them and a picture of them, to now let's get into their lives and find out what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I think that might have changed. Another evolutionary part of the whole phenomena was now we're invested in not only who they are and what they look like, and, oh, he's hot, oh, she's cute, oh, she's beautiful, whatever. Now it's like, what are they doing? And the gossipy side of it came into it, and that drove us more to want to be this, like, fan worship, so to speak, because then you have people like Kim Kardashian. In all honesty, what has she really done? Mm-hmm. I mean, her dad was a famous lawyer of O.J. Simpson, and then you had Paris Hilton. Mm-hmm. What did she do? But she had TV shows. You can even go nowadays to social media, where people are on social media, and you've got all these people that are YouTubers and TikTok and
the influencers,
the influencers, and they haven't done anything except done it, and yet we still worship them, and we still want to be involved in them, and we still want to find out more about them, and so the obsession grows greater and greater, and it gets to the point, obviously, for some people it's unhealthy, and so then you've got a problem when it becomes unhealthy. But yet there's still a fine balance between a healthy obsession, which is fun, and an unhealthy one, which then becomes problematic. I remember I had a buddy of mine that had a security company, and every year I would help him out and do security for Young and the Restless, Bold and the Beautiful. Fan show up at the...
I was on General Hospital, by the way.
Yeah. and so all the fans from the fan club would come out and see the actors and actresses, and they were all fanatical, thus the word fan, but they were all had a healthy check because you get to know them, every year. But it was kind of funny because you see all these actors and actresses on the shows, and they would go through the whole show, like the presentation and the actual performance or the actual ceremony of the fan club. And then they'd all go off into the big rooms, and they'd have a table, and then you can line up and get autographs and pictures. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Eric Braeden, he's Victor Newman on the show.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, yeah.
He's been on forever, 40-some years. I remember the last year I was there, it was, he's probably the most famous. In fact, it was rumored that he wasn't going to show up, him and Victoria Newman, or the other girl. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Anyways, they weren't going to show up because it's just getting, they were getting up there in age and had been there forever. Well, they were going to shock everybody and bring them in. They decided they would do it. So it was a big surprise. Only security knew that they were coming in, and the whole place went nuts. Anyways, so here's a guy. He shows up at like 2 in the afternoon, 3 in the afternoon to the start of this event. Midnight. He's the last one there, signing autographs, taking pictures. All the other young celebrities had taken off, all gone, the bars, whatever. He's still there. And I remember I was asked because they were letting people go. And so since I knew the guy that was kind of running things security-wise, I got to stay until the end. And so I'm sitting at his table with him, just kind of, watching. So at the end, I asked him, I said, why do you stay? You're like the biggest celebrity of them all. He goes, it's because these people here are the reason why I am who I am today. And he goes, all these people leave, and that's fine. He's not judgment. But he remembered the people that put him there, made him popular. He was a fan favorite. Yeah. And the fans came to see him, so he was going to be there for the very last minute. And anybody that wanted a picture, anybody that wanted an autograph, he was going to be there until till the end. And that was kind of interesting. It was like, oh, that's phenomenal. There's another guy, Steve Taylor. He's a musician, Christian musician guy that I have followed throughout the years. Got to meet him a couple times, and he's probably the closest to my celebrity worship or whatever that I'd get to, because you kind of like, oh, wow, it's him. But same thing. I've seen him at different concerts and stuff, and he would have people come, take pictures. And the last time he was down in Hollywood at the Whiskey A Go-Go a couple years ago, and he was there till the end. They kicked him out at like 2 a.m. They kicked us all out. He's on Sunset Boulevard taking pictures and signing autographs at 2 a.m.
Right.
Because same thing. I asked him about it. He said the same thing. These are the people that make us. And so when you get those people that really understand who it is that made them, and it becomes about the fan in these instances as opposed to themselves, it's kind of refreshing to think that. And it comes from these veteran people. The longevity, they know the longevity comes from. We had a chance one time on a sports show to talk to Kevin Costner. And it was fascinating to talk to him because he went into the detail of the importance of the little things, the way you walk into a room, the way you might say something. You don't just say the dialogue, the way you say it, the way you shoot it, the camera angle. I mean, the attention to detail. And people like that, who have an appreciation for their craft, not only recognizing the fans that kind of made them, but also the appreciation for their craft and how they do things. And I'm not just going to do a movie to do a movie. I'm going to make sure the shot. I'm going to make sure that the wardrobe. I'm going to make sure that everything is just right, because that's what makes the difference. And to me, that's what I find absolutely fascinating about these successful people. And when you hear stories like that, then I don't mind that, they're who they are. Because they've worked hard for it and they know where they come from. And then on the flip side, you've got people that you're like, why are you even doing that? You're just, basing off your looks, or because you have a multiple following on social media, or you haven't done anything. When you do something, and something that has some meat to it, then that, I think, is when you really kind of reach the apex of Hollywood and worthy of the Hollywood sign that's behind us.
Yeah. I mean, if you're grounded, obviously, you're going to go a lot further no matter what you do. If you're doing it for reasons of, creativity and for maybe using your platform for philanthropy and investing in other people and giving back to the fans, then I think you have a well-rounded career no matter what you're doing, But if you're not grounded and you don't know who you are and you're just striving for the audience first and the craft second, or fame first and the craft and the integrity and the quality second, then that's, I think, when people get upside down and get backwards and, get into trouble.
Do you remember who your first celebrity or your first autograph or first whatever was? Who you met, who it was?
On set?
No, just in life.
Oh, in life? Probably Justin Hartley, the guy that plays Kevin on This Is Us.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I remember that.
I had just recently had a picture taken with him in February, I guess. It's on my Instagram, but, on set, I guess, is when I started meeting. Yeah. I never met anybody until I started working as background. Yeah.
The first person I ever met, I was really young, Dean Jones. From Herbie the Love Bug and all that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
He was also in other movies, but he was back then known for Herbie the Love Bug. And he was at an event. I think it was at Hollywood Press Church, in fact. But he was at an event, and I walked up to him. I had a piece of paper. I think I still have the autograph somewhere, and a pencil. That was what it was, paper and a pencil. I just grabbed something and asked him for his autograph, and he was like, okay, I'll give it to you, but if you tell nobody that I'm here. Because he didn't want to be bombarded. He wasn't there for that. But I thought that was kind of cool thinking back on it. He could have turned me away, and been like, no, I'm not here for that. But he's like, okay, I'll give it to you, but don't let anybody know I'm here.
Yeah. Don't blow my cover.
Yeah, don't blast it. I'm like, oh, cool, so I got one. So that was kind of cool. And so maybe that's why your first taste. Now, there's been other people that I've met that it's just like, dude, you're a quadruple douche. And it's like, I don't want to deal with you ever again. So you got that too. So, like anything in life, you're going to run the gauntlet.
I did actually sit beside, my husband and I sat beside Anne Hathaway and her husband at Malibu. I shouldn't say. I won't say the actual place. Anyway, they were there 4 years ago, and we sat beside them, and my husband had no idea who she was, which was hilarious because we've watched the Princess Diaries a bazillion times. So, it cracked me up that he didn't know who she was. And so he was asking all these funny questions, like, oh, so what do you guys do? And they're just looking at him like, oh my God. But she was super nice.
The other two people that I got to meet that I thought were really cool was the wrestler Chyna.
Mm.
She was really cool. Not what you would have thought. She was on a radio show. We got to interview her, and dude, she opened up about abuse, and I mean, she was there to talk wrestling, and it turned out to be kind of like an autobiography of her life. It was just amazing. And then afterwards, I got to talk to her a little bit more in depth, and she was really cool. And another one was Gene Simmons. I met him wandering the halls at a radio station. And he was lost for some reason. And so I say, hey, I use the excuse, I'll walk you out, And so I got to talk to him for a little bit. And that guy's a hoot, man. He was crazy. So there are people out there that are really cool. And maybe their public persona is something. But in reality, when they're just down to earth people, and maybe they build up that wall because you get inundated, with the, continue to ask for autographs, I've seen a lot of people.
I think we project them to be a certain way. We want them to be a certain way. And then when they're not, we're really disappointed. And then we blame it on them. They're just people.
Yeah. And I've seen many people, you live out here, you're going to run across them. I've seen many people just in Heather Tom, for example, who was on Young and the Restless or Bold and the Beautiful, one of those. She used to live right up the street from me. I see her at the grocery store all the time, and I think one time, I think she might have drove by, saw me outside, whatever, but she's like, hey, you're my neighbor, right? I'm like, yeah, how's it going? And that was it. And then we see each other quite a bit in the grocery store, but, hey, what's up? That's it, because they want to be left alone. That's their private life. Or others, you'd sit there and you kind of make, like you said, that eye contact, and you just kind of give them the nod or the wink that you recognize who they are, but then you just leave them alone, and they appreciate that, if they're at the airport or whatever. And so it's fascinating when you're out here, or anybody having a situation where you come across somebody. You never know, A, what they're going to be like, and B, you don't know how that is going to change. And I would say this would be the final thing I would say. If there's somebody that you are a super, super, super big fan of, I would recommend not meeting them. Because they may dash.
They might disappoint you, yeah.
And disappoint you, yes. So I would say if there is somebody, don't meet them. Yeah. Because they could, and that, because I've had that happen. I've had that happen where I met a couple of people that I thought would be cool, like especially in the sports world, and I'm like, dude, you're a douchebag to infinity and beyond, and I want nothing to do with you ever again. In fact, just trash all their memorabilia or whatever. So you do have to kind of be a little bit careful, but then also know that when you approach them, it could be who they are, where they're at, all that stuff, and that's a different thing too. But it's a fascinating world of Hollywood, and you've been more into it as far as the sets and stuff than other people have. So, did you get as an extra on set? Is that what you are, an extra? Is that like a PC term?
They've called us all different names over the years: extras, atmosphere, background actors. Yeah.
So, when it comes to pay, you guys get paid well or not?
If you're in the union, okay, which I am a registered SAG-AFTRA. I'm in the union. Pay my dues.
Okay, a couple quick things, just so people know. Adam Sandler, recently, $250 million to do 4 Netflix films. That's how much he's getting paid. Will Smith, $100 million just to do Men in Black 3. Keanu Reeves, $250 million he made for the 3 Matrix movies. He's one of the top, I guess, grossing actors. He does really well. Harrison Ford made $65 million for Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. Jack Nicholson, $50 million for the Joker and Batman. Cameron Diaz, I don't know if you saw this movie. Horrible movie. Worst movie. One of the worst movies I've probably ever seen. Bad Teacher, $42 million. Tom Hanks, you mentioned him, $40 million for Saving Private Ryan. $60 million for Forrest Gump. Emma Stone, $26 million for La La Land. And as we wrap things up, that's what's at stake with some of these people when they enter Hollywood, when they come from who knows where, and they come out here to Hollywood, and you see them bussing tables and waiting tables. That is what you're looking at. People are going for that shot at that big dollar, that fame, to get that star on the Walk of Fame, and it could be a steep price they pay if they're not careful, and they may never achieve it.
There's a lot of people that do not. The cream rises to the top. The talent rises to the top.
So to thine own self be true. We are here in the shadows of the Hollywood sign talking about Hollywood. Speaking of Hollywood and speaking of finding us, you can find us on Instagram at 2 Steps Ed Podcast, Two Steps Ahead Podcast. You can click the link in the bio, and there's a swag shop, so you can buy merchandise. There's also YouTube. You can watch our videos on YouTube, and there's platforms to hear us on Spotify, Pandora, SoundCloud, and a bunch of others. So click the link in the bio there at Two Steps Ahead Podcast on Instagram, TWO. Two Steps Ahead Podcast. And my Instagram is Edem Rocks, EIDEM, ROCKS. And again, I've got a link in the bio with similar stuff, a couple different things. And then also check out RadioWarp.com. Our show is on there. It's a live streaming internet radio station. We're on there Mondays and Wednesdays, 11 a.m. and 8 p.m. Plus there's other cool content there as well. And they can find you.
I am on social media, Instagram at Tara Hoke Shiro, TaraHokeschiro. I'm also on Facebook. There's a link on my Instagram page. There's a Bubble store or TV sightings that you can see all the shows that I've been on. You can flick through that album. And then there's also a link on the page to go to my website where my blog is. There's a podcast video library. There's the swag shop where you can buy T-shirts and merchandise and stuff like that.
Hey, so check us out online. Thanks for listening. Do tell a friend. Take your passion. Make it happen. Let yourself be great. Hollywood sign behind us could be an inspiration for you. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next time. Be kind and don't be an a-hole.
Thanks, guys.